This presentation is for the Apple's Senior 3G. We will be going through features of the machine, all of the different modalities, the cords, everything that essentially goes with the machine. So this machine has been around for over 25 years. It's just been different models. So the Senior machine, then the Senior 2, and this is the Senior 3G, which is the third generation of the Senior machine. The Senior technology, just like the Junior machine, are both 13.56 megahertz machines. Okay, so this is the type of technology that we're talking about. So let's go through some of the easy stuff. So when we pull the machine essentially out of the box, you have the machine there, and then it comes with a few different cords and things. So the cords in the front, they're going to be outlined here by numbers, and I'll just kind of click them all so that we can see. So what we have from left to right is our red connector. Then we have a probe holder connector here, a probe holder connector there. This is not available on the US version of the machines, but some of you are joining us from the UK and from Canada if they made it back into the class, and so they might have something like this. This is for a different type of attachment that we don't have in the US. And then the little black connector here for our ground electrode. So I will switch over to my webcam so that I can show you. Let's back this up a little bit. So hopefully you can all see. I might add the chat box here also so that we can see if there's an issue. So hopefully everybody's still following along here. And so what I have here is my Senior 3G setup, and then in the front there is going to be the different cords. So we have the red connector, which is this one here, that connects to that, and the red connector with the red cord will have one of two attachments on it. And so we'll go through that. We have the probe holder A, we have probe holder B. My light. We have the black connector here, and this is the connector that I was telling you is capped for the US market, but if you're in another country, you may actually see that. Okay. So in the back of the machine, this is how we turn it on. So essentially what we have there is going to be the connector for your foot pedal, the connector for the power, the switch to turn it on and off, and there's usually a fuse at this point here, which is capped off. So I'm going to turn on the machine with the back. So the power outlet, the on and off switch, the fuse holder, and the foot pedal connector is all in the back of the machine. There are two different possibilities of probe holders, and both come with the machine when you buy them. One is a short, which is the one that I'm on right now here. So this is a short probe holder, and this is a regular. Let me show you the differences in the probe holders here using the webcam. So I have my two probe holders here. Let's look them down here. So what essentially I've got here is the regular and the short. There is also a size extra short that is made, which is essentially going to be half of this size here. So we have even shorter than the short probe holder, and that is the extra short. Note that the probe holders on these Senior 3Gs are going to have an attachment that is specific to the Senior 3G. So this connector here fits on the Senior 3Gs. You cannot get this cord and try to use it on the XL or the Platinum machines. So the red cable connector, which gets connected on the left side of your machine, comes with a couple of different attachments. So we have the plate, we have the rod. Both of those are interchangeable and get plugged in at the tip of the cord. These are sponges that fit the actual electrodes. As far as, for cross-contamination purposes, especially with what's going on right now, most of these would be used once with a client, and then you would have to wash or sanitize it in some way. So keep that in mind. The red connector is used when we do auto mode, when we do blends, when we do the tolerance test, when we do pure galvanic, and when we do the moisture test, if available on the machines. There's a red light that will light up over the connector when the ground is required. So anytime you are going to be on some modality that requires the ground, the light will actually light up here. And that tells you that you need to actually give the client the ground for whatever you're doing. You always need to place some sort of wet sponge around the electrode. So this is the sponge. And the reason for the another thing that you can do, wet paper towels. Some people use, the scent-free, oil-free baby wipes. Any sort of wet cloth over the ground will work. It just increases the conductivity, which is the reason why people will use something like that. The black connector is for our electrodes that have the rollers. So this is more for cataphoresis. So we use this with anaphoresis and cataphoresis, which are both available on the machine as a type of aftercare. Anaphoresis we don't really do after electrolysis, but it is available on the machine. Anytime we select our cataphoresis mode, the light will light up, letting you know that this is active, and therefore you can use it to do your treatment. Always use a water-based product on the skin. It says here not available in the USA. That is no longer true. This PowerPoint is from a time when the FDA did not like the words ionophoresis in the books, but that is no longer true. Any machine in the US will come with anaphoresis, cataphoresis. So when we first get the machine, we do have to go through configuration in order to put in the date and time. So the configuration key is this one here. So let me go over to, let me actually add the video pod. Now you can switch on from one to the other in order to see the machine and see the PowerPoint in this same screen. I'm just going to adjust so that we can see the screen now. And I'm going to turn on my machine. So remember that to turn on the machine, it was in the back. So I've turned on my machine. And what I want to do is press on the configuration key. So the configuration key is the one that has the 2 bolts. So we're looking at this key here. So this is configuration. When I press here, what I have from left to right is the clinic name, the language and the version, the volume, the date and time, and then these are sort of statistics. How many times the pedal was pushed on this machine and how long it's been running on while turned on. So we have these types of statistics, just like the in your cars, how you can have the mileage. And it tells you how many times or how many hours, and also how far you've taken the car. So let's continue with our PowerPoint. Let's move this here. So if we click underneath the clinic name here, you might not be able to see my screen as well as maybe you would yours, but essentially what you see is Appalachia Center 3G, and the A is blinking. What you'll notice is that each key has in a black circle some sort of letter or a character. So in order for you to change the name, since it's blinking, it's just you have to find the letters that you want, and you can make them uppercase and lowercase, and then go ahead and type in whatever your salon name here. So we can change the name of the salon just by using the keys here. In order to confirm, we use the foot pedal. So the foot pedal is like our enter key with this machine. So anytime that I want to confirm a selection, I press on the foot pedal and it will take me back to the original screen where I was. This one. The second thing is the language selection and program version. Go back. So we're back on our screen here. So now I will select the second key, which is going to change the language. And I'm in Spanish, and then now I'm in Italian, and here I'm in Dutch, and I'm in, I think, I'm not too sure what this one is, and this is Portuguese. So there's quite a bit of languages on here. You can change it if you speak a different language more that is better than English, then you can go ahead and change it to that. Anytime you need to know the version of your machine, you can also see that here. The sounds, there's two tonalities. Essentially, the volume here will be the actual beeps that you hear when you press on the foot pedal. 9 is the highest that it will go. You can also have a volume of 0, which will turn off the volume completely. So when the 9 is blinking, now is the time for me to use my numerical keypad and change the volume to anything that I want to do. In the school, for example, most of the machines are really loud because there's a lot of people and there's a lot of machines beeping at the same time. But when you're by yourself in your office, you can opt to have the volume down really low or completely off if you so choose. The second tonalities is usually more when we are talking about doing the blends so that we can hear the pulses when we do the pulsing blend, for example, as opposed to only hearing the pulse at the very end. Date and time, pretty self-explanatory. When we press underneath date and time here, we can actually change the date and time. This machine is going to be in military time. So it is a 24-hour clock. Keep that in mind. The XLs have the ability to do a 12-hour clock, but here we're in a 24-hour clock. So date and time is going to be here, month, date, and year. So again, to go back to our first screen, I'm just going to press on my foot pedal, which is like my enter key. Pressed one too many times, and it will go back to my configuration. So configuration is this key here. The hair count is here. The hair count and the total amount of hours used, again, just tells you how many times you've pressed on the foot pedal. That is the only way that you can count hairs on this machine. As a side note, it doesn't know whether you've successfully removed a hair or not. And also the amount of times that the machine has stayed on, whether you've been working with it or not. When we press on the other configuration menu key, which this one is actually found on the right-hand side of the machine here, it's a little hand that is pointing to the display screen. So when we press there, we actually see another configuration key. So make sure you press until you see the actual options show up here. What we have from left to right is going to be whether we use insulated settings or non-insulated settings. So the machine can give you insulated settings, assuming that you use insulated probes with the machine. It can also give you settings for stainless steel or non-insulated probes. The main difference between the two is that the insulated settings are slightly less intense than the non-insulated ones. So by pressing right underneath it, I can change to insulated or non-insulated. So if I compare chin 3 in insulated versus chin 3 in non-insulated, my non-insulated chin 3 will be hotter than my insulated chin 3. What we have next, let's go to here. Okay, it's just going to start to go through here. So we'll put a pin in that, and then we are going to continue with the presentation. So let's talk a little bit about the different types of probes, since we're talking about insulated versus non-insulated probes. Probes come with different types. Here it says mandrins. Mandrins is just referring to the shank of the probe, so the part of the probe that fits inside the probe holder. There's different types of shanks or mandrins, and these are the F or the K, which are the ones that we will be most familiar with, and J shank, which is another type of sizing of the shank here. So when we buy probes and we buy F2, F3, the F refers to the type of shank that this probe has. Anytime you buy a machine, usually in the US market for the purpose of electrology, we use F shank types of probes. There are specific probe holders that hold the F shank probes. If you buy a K shank probe and you have an F shank probe holder, the K shank is much skinnier, and so when you put it into the probe holder, it will just slip right out. So these actually require a special type of probe holder in order to be able to work with a K-shank probe. So F refers to the sizing or the diameter of your shank here. And then we go through different types of probes as far as two-piece versus one-piece, insulated versus non-insulated, gold-plated. So all of these are available on the market. Essentially, a two-piece probe just means that a probe is a shank and the filament, and both of those are two separate pieces, and the filament is actually pinched into the shank itself. A one-piece probe just means that a shank is filed down into a point. So it is one continuous piece of metal from the shank down to the point. So the name sort of says it all here, one piece versus two piece. Then we go a little bit further and we talk about insulations. Insulations come in different forms, different company, different manufacturers will have different types of insulations. With the ProTech, we have Teflon. So you have IsoGuard and IsoBlend being the two different types of insulated probes with ProTech. And the difference between those is the degree of insulating material versus non-insulated material. So surgical stainless steel covered in Teflon, and how much of it is covered will mean that you have either an IsoGuard or an IsoBlend. An IsoBlend is insulated almost halfway. So you have a probe with a lot of exposed area on it. An IsoGuard is insulated almost to the tip, so just a small exposed area at the tip. With one-piece probes, you also have insulation. Most of them will resemble something like probe E here, which is almost to the tip. And then F is a gold-plated probe. A gold-plated probe has the same type of material as a regular stainless steel, but it will have a fine coating of gold right on top of it. That fine coating of gold is used mainly for people with very sensitive skin or allergies to metals, that sort of thing. So gold-plated probes are also on the market. Those, keep in mind, are non-insulated probes. When we go from non-insulated to insulated, what happens is that you end up concentrating the energy to the tip of the probe, the area where the actual exposed part of the probe is. A non-insulated means that any part of that probe that is inside of the hair follicle is fair game for the current to actually exit and treat the skin. So since we have no Teflon coating protecting the upper part of the follicle, we actually have energy leaking up here. This is thermolysis, and you know that this is thermolysis because you see the teardrop pattern of coagulation. This is the point effect. The current with thermolysis likes to go to the point, it will radiate out, but because we're non-insulated, some of it will leak up here. We need a lot more energy to reach this nice big bubble here. When we have an insulated probe, this here, while it is inside the follicle, because it is covered in Teflon, it no longer can conduct electricity. So all of the energy is pushed to only this area here. So you don't have the loss of energy that you do in this one here. And so less energy is needed to create the same size of heating pattern as with this non-insulated. When we talk about doing galvanic or blend, we can also benefit from using insulated probes. The thing is that galvanic produces the lye on the surface of the probe that is exposed to the actual moisture in the follicle. If you don't have enough surface area, you don't make adequate amounts of lye. So you don't want probes that are too insulated. We do want some surface area. That's the main reason why the ISO blend was even introduced, is because they took into account that lye needs surface area. And so this would be too small of a surface area. It would take a long time to produce adequate amounts of lye. So a probe like this still gives you the benefit of being insulated, but you have more exposed area, more space for the lye to be produced evenly along this probe. So, ooh, that went fast. So when you have an insulated probe, since we are essentially concentrating the intensity more at the tip of the probe, we don't need as much power to create the same amount of coagulation. We just don't have the loss of energy in areas where it doesn't need to go. So you have energy concentrated on the non-insulated tip, lower parameters because we don't have the loss of energy. It all goes where we need it, and so therefore we don't need as much of it. Because the parameters are lower, it's more comfortable, and because you have the Teflon protecting the top of the skin, we tend to see less skin reactions. When the second menu here, when we go back to our menu that we were looking under, the second key is for the delay between high frequency pulses. So the machine allows you to do multiple pulses for you. So I can press and hold down the foot pedal, and the machine will beep 2, 3, 4 times without me having to lift and put my foot back down on the pedal. I can decide how long I want between those pulses though. And that's what this menu is here for. So if I do decide to do 2 pulses, for example, and I set my machine to do 2 pulses, and we'll visit that in a little bit, I can decide that I want my pulses really close together, and let's say put them at 0.03 of a second. Or I can decide that I want them really far apart, and so I can put them at 0.09 of a second. Any combination, so you have the seconds and you have the tenths of a second mark, any combination of that is acceptable on the machine. You just press underneath here, it will highlight, use your numerical keypad, and you can change the delay between pulses. So here's a pulse, the dots signify the delay, and here's the second pulse. When we are in blend mode, instead of seeing the pulse delay icon that we just saw, we actually see the galvanic high frequency lead. So what that means is that when I do blend, I can decide which current I want to lead, which current I want to come on first. Factory preset will give you galvanic first, high frequency following. But you can actually change that by pressing underneath here, and it will flip from high frequency to galvanic. So I'm going to switch over to the video, and let's take a look at both, one in high frequency and the other is going to be with the galvanic. So right now what it's pointing at is the high frequency. The reason for that is because I was actually in micro flash mode, which is a high frequency mode. So when I press underneath here, what I'll see is that there's a little box that starts blinking on top of my 0.5. 0.5 is factory preset for the delay between pulses. So should you never touch it in your life, it will just give you half a second between pulses. I can use the arrows here to move my cursor from the 0.5 to the 0 and back. I can change it to be, like I said, let's say I want it to be 0.9. So I've changed it to be 0.9. It's confirmed my selection. It's gone back to the modality that I was using. If you don't see the video, make sure that you are either selecting the video from the menu on the left or that you are in the screen where you see all of the pods at the same time. No, Kelly asked if when you turn off the epilator, will it go back to factory presets? No, it will not. So the machine remembers some of the things that you actually input into it when you turn it off. In order to change it, you have to go back into it and change it into something else. So now let's go into our blend settings just so that we can see the difference in that same menu. So which modality doesn't matter at this point. What I want to do is actually just go into blend and then go back into our menu. So I was in this menu here. Now where I used to see the pulses, I see the galvanic high frequency. So this tells me that galvanic leads, high frequency comes in second. If I press here, it will just flip it. Now high frequency leads, galvanic comes in second. Okay, so I'll put it back to what I had here. Now it has it here. And just like with the pulses, it will remember your preference, and so it will stay in your high frequency lead. So if you just did it for that one client that one time, you can go back, you'll have to go back into it to switch it over, otherwise it will stay with a high frequency lead. Okay, perfect. So let's go back into our PowerPoint. So the third menu here is going to be the auto delay. So we have the ability on this machine to work without the foot pedal. That is called auto mode. Auto mode essentially means that instead of you using the foot pedal for the pulses, it actually has a sensor. And when you are doing the insertion, the machine will sense that and then automatically deliver the pulses. How we do auto mode is that you have to, first of all, turn it on. So let's go into our machine face again. So make sure you flip to the video. Let's go back into our thermolysis just for the sake of turning this on. It doesn't really matter too much here. But the auto mode key is going to be the one here that has the light on top of it. So it has a picture of a foot pedal with a line going through it. When I select this, the light turns on. So that tells me auto mode is activated. Now, when I work auto mode, what I want you to notice is that my light turned on for my red connector being the ground. So if I turn off my auto mode, see the light turns off. So when I work in high frequency with the pedal, I don't need a ground. This is not blend. But if I decide to do auto mode in high frequency, this turns it on here. This tells me now I need to have the ground. The reason why you need the ground is because the way that the machine can tell you did an insertion is that it senses the moisture in the client's skin. And in order to sense the moisture, you have to have some sort of feedback. So you give the client the ground. I wrap this up, or I can use, remember that there is also the rod. Sorry, I bumped the camera. There's also the rod. Either of these will work. It doesn't matter which one you choose. Just wrap it up with a wet paper towel. Sometimes this one here just does better to stick it in underneath a limb or in the pants or the belt or the shoulder of the client so that they can just lay on it without having to hold anything. So wrap this up, give it to the client holds the ground, and then what you do is you will do an insertion. As soon as you do an insertion, you'll hear sort of a little bloop, and that little noise tells you that the machine sensed the moisture on the skin. So that starts some sort of countdown. This countdown is how long you have to do an insertion before the machine actually delivers the pulses. That delay is what we can change in that menu. So if we go back to our PowerPoint, when we are in the menu and it says auto delay, the auto delay will tell you the insertion delay. So here we have 1.5 seconds. So that tells me that from the time the machine senses the skin, I have 1.5 seconds to do an insertion before the machine will automatically deliver the pulses for me. You can change this number. So that depends on probably the speed of your insertion, where you're working. You know, an insertion on somebody's lower leg is much easier, much quicker than maybe underneath the chin on the left side. So sometimes insertions may take longer, sometimes they won't. So you can adjust it depending on your working speed, the area that you're working on. If you do an insertion, let's say, and you're off, when you retract the probe from the skin, the machine will automatically sense that you're no longer in the follicle and it will cancel the countdown. So practice this on yourself. It makes a lot of noises, but essentially you can work auto mode using the machine. If you choose to do 2 pulses, you will need to set it on the machine. So we'll go back to that, but with auto mode, you can set the machine to do 2 pulses for you, and this is what this number here designates. And it will deliver 2 pulses in the auto mode. So you don't have to do 2 separate insertions. Go continue here. So the fourth on the menu is the alarm. The alarm is the time that you need essentially at the end of a session. So when we use our timer, and our timer, let's say, would be for a 60-minute session. When you reach 55 minutes of treatment, you may want an alarm to let you know that you have 5 minutes left, or maybe you set it to 3, or maybe you set it to 10, or whatever it is that you want to do. You can use this alarm however you want, but know that it is going to be an alarm that is going to be whatever this number is until the end of whatever session you've set. So if it's a 60-minute session and a 5-minute alarm, then you will work for 55 minutes. The machine will beep and it will continue for the last 5 minutes, but it lets you know you have 5 minutes left. So in that time, you can do your cataphoresis, you can do your aftercare, you can get the last little bit of hair that you'd remembered she said she wanted to get done on her toes. So anything that you'd want to do, it just tells you that you're about to be done with your session. The save program is for you to customize different presets. So the machine comes with a lot of presets, but you have the ability to actually come up with your own sets of timing and intensities, both in Galvanic and in Blend and in Thermolysis. So you can save these programs, and essentially this is where you're going to go to do that, but you will retrieve your programs underneath the program key under the user settings. And so we'll see what those are when we get to that point. You have 10 different spots, so you can save 10 programs per modality. You have to have the treatment modality set with the parameters. So let's say I'm in microflash and I've selected whole new times and intensities. I can select those and then save them under microflash with the user number 00, and then I can use 01, and I can use 02, 03, all the way to 09. So that's 10 different spots. So the next time that I'm in microflash, I can use my setting 03, and it will actually populate my machine with the settings that I've created myself. I can do that in microflash, I can do that in thermoflash, I can do that in multiplex, in omniblend, in pulsing blend. So you get the point. Any preset, any setting on the machine, any modality, you can create 10 customized settings. The timer. So when we go back into our treatment screen, we have a timer on the screen. The timer goes to 99 minutes. So it is not in hours, unfortunately, but you have the ability to actually set a timer. So if you do an hour and a half, for example, that would be 90 minutes. You could set your timer to say 90 minutes. And then remember, in our menu, we could set an alarm for 5 minutes, for 7 minutes. And so I could set an hour and a half session, a 7-minute alarm, and then work until I have 7 minutes left. The machine will beep. And then from there, I can do my cataphoresis, aftercare, wrap up the session, whatever it is I want to do. And the machine will beep a final time. So it can keep track of your sessions that way. The countdown can decrease. If you set something into it, it will count down from there. So let's take a look at what that might look like. I'm sorry if it's a little bit blurry. What I'm going to do is press right underneath here, and I'm going to put in 15 minutes. So once I've done my 15 minutes, it says here, and it says stop at the top because it's right now it's paused. You can start the timer a couple of ways. You can press on the stop light that's right here. This is start stop. You can also start the timer by pressing on the foot pedal. So once I've done that, let's see. Oh, it's on auto mode. Take off auto mode, and then you should be able to do it. Now I press on it, and so the timer starts to count down. You work here, but in order to, let's say, stop my timer because I need to get up to go to the bathroom, this is where I would press on the stop light. And then my stop comes on, my timer has stopped. The other way to use the timer is to have it just start at 00. Let's say that you don't know how long you're going to work on this client. You can just have the timer start at 0. And then the same way as you did before, you start, and now the machine will count up. And so you work however long you need to, and then you can check out your machine and see how long you've actually worked for. So let's go through the treatment modes. The treatment modes, we see them on the side. So the very big keys on the left side of the machines are going to be your treatment modes. So we have a little pointer here. So we have the thermolysis, because you see the alternating wave. This is blends, and also straight galvanic will be in this one here. And this is anaphoresis, cataphoresis. So these are treatment modes. Under the high frequency, we have 3 different modalities. The modalities are going to display up here. So right now I'm in microflash. It's actually lit up. I know it's a little bit hard to see, but it's lit up. And so that tells me that I'm in the high frequency modalities. In order to access the other ones, you just need to press the key and it will automatically flip through the different modalities. Now I'm in multiplex and now I'm in thermoflash. I press again and go back to microflash, multiplex, thermoflash. So these are essentially the 3 modalities that I have, and I can flip through them one after the other. With the blends, I can do the same thing, but I need to come into the blend modes here. And so I have here omniblend. This one here is multi-blend. Then we have electrolysis, which is straight galvanic. And why is cataphoresis here? Pulsing blend. It was a little bit odd. Should not have been. So then anaphoresis and cataphoresis will be down at the bottom here. So we'll start, I believe, with the thermolysis modalities. So let's go back to, yes. Okay, so thermolysis or high frequency current is an alternating current which constantly changes polarity. It produces a constant attraction, repulsion, alternation of the atoms within the tissues. This creates a push and pull, which will create friction in the anatomical structure. That friction causes heat, and the heat gets hot enough to kill cells responsible for hair growth. So we essentially cause friction in the tissues using alternating current. The speed of that wave we've talked about was 13.56 megahertz. And how that heat coagulates is just by causing friction in the tissues. That friction causes heat, like rubbing your hands together really fast. And you get it hot enough, at least 50 degrees Celsius, you kill the cells responsible for hair growth permanently. With thermoflash, when we look at a modality, what you need to look at is going to be the way that the time and the intensities are displayed. So on the machine here, when we talk about thermoflash, we are talking about a modality that is in hundredths of a second. So at a decimal and then 2 numbers past the decimal point. This is the hundredths of a second spot. And medium intensity. Medium intensity will usually be between about 40 to 60%. So hundredths of a second, medium intensity. And we'll go through some of the presets here, but I'll just go through the different modalities first so that we can talk about time and intensity and how they'll differ. Remember that I told you that with the insulated settings, the intensities are a little bit less because it takes into account that you have some insulation on the probe, so you're concentrating the energy. So if we had with a regular non-insulated settings, 0.11 at 59%, then with insulated probes, we're at 0.10, 54%. And this is going to be the same preset. The presets are essentially the time and intensity recipes that have been tested and that you can pull up in order to work and do this quickly. So for underarm, for example, we'll have a bunch of different mixtures of time and intensities that are labeled from 0 to 9 that will give you different intensities for you to work with. So when you have a client and they have about a medium-sized hair, you can go to underarm 54 or underarm 53 and pull up a time and intensity to use to get started with. Microflash is the other modality. This one here, if you look at the time and intensity, you'll notice that now we're getting into thousandths of a second. The intensity is also much higher. So this is a current with high intensity, The percentage is usually above 60%, but the timing is in thousandths of a second. So the pulse is really, really fast. When you have high intensity, you need really, really fast timing. As the intensity gets lower, we can have longer timing. I've showed you that you can also set the machine to do 2 pulses. So remember, this key here allows you to set the machine to do 2 pulses. When we do set the machine to do 2 pulses, the machine will automatically reduce the intensity of the pulses. The reason for that is because it takes into account that in the time between the pulses, the heat in the tissues has not completely dissipated out of the tissue. So you're essentially delivering heat. The tissues are losing some of the heat, but it's not going back to normal body temperature before you're delivering the second pulse. So you are essentially making the second pulse a little bit more intense. So the machine will reduce them a little bit to take into account the fact that the tissues are retaining some of the heat from the first pulse. A technique that you can do, and you might read about this, you probably do it already, is something called displacement. The displacement method is when you are delivering 2 pulses in 2 different parts of the follicle. So when you do a pulse down at the bottom, this is the dermal papilla, and let's say this is an insulated IsoGuard probe. So insulation is almost to the tip. You would want to actually move out on an anagen hair and treat the bulge area, which is up a little bit higher. And so you would move and displace your pulses, 1 pulse at the bottom, another pulse up a little bit higher. So you are essentially destroying both the papilla and the bulge area. When you do multiplex, so multiplex is another type of high frequency modality that we have on the machine. This one is a little bit different because you have a mixture of 2 different types of high frequencies. One is a low intensity, long duration, high frequency. This helps to create porosity and prep the follicle. It does not coagulate. We use this a lot when we do blends. We do this in order to intensify the second type of high frequency, which is the microflash. We've seen microflash already. Microflash is the high intensity, really fast pulse. What happens with microflash is that because the pulse is so quick, it tends to be very concentrated. It's also the most comfortable. But because it's so concentrated, it tends not to be so good with really thick, really deep hairs. So if we have a client that is sensitive or that has very dry follicles and maybe is not the best candidate for thermoflash because they are sensitive, like I said, you could opt to select multiplex in order to use that slow thermolysis to prep the follicle. This is the graph I was looking for. So slow thermolysis to prep the follicle, and then the high frequency microflash pulse at the end, which will be a little bit better conducted in the follicle as it would have been by itself. If you do 2 pulses with the multiplex, I would always set it on the machine. The reason for that is because the machine will not repeat the pre-warming. It will just give you 2 pulses of the microflash at the end. So if we do 2 pulses with multiplex, don't do it manually, and manually will refer to me pressing on the foot pedal in order to deliver the pulses. So I would set it on the machine, let the machine do the pulses for me, and that way I don't repeat that pre-warming. I can still do the motion, the papilla to bulge with the probe. So that is doing displacement. So when do we use which? Well, thermolysis and microflash essentially, well, thermolysis techniques in general can be used for all of the different types of hair growth cycles. It doesn't matter if you have a telogen, an anagen, or anything like that. You can use thermolysis with all of these. But thermoflash, because of the longer timing, you have a little bit more spread of power, more collateral damage, you could say. And so you would want to use thermoflash usually for deeper, thicker hairs. You can also use that for more dry hairs. So your stubborn cases, you'll tend to go to thermoflash over the other ones. Microflash, because it is so quick, will not have as much of a collateral damage, or it will not spread as far from the tip of the probe. It is much more concentrated. And concentrated pulse are good for fine, superficial, telogen, sensitive clients. The speed of this pulse also makes it very comfortable. So if you have somebody that is very sensitive, you could opt to do the microflash. Now remember that we have multiplex. Multiplex is the mixture of that slow thermolysis with the microflash pulse. So what you have is you have microflash, which is for superficial, fine facial telogen sensitive clients, and you can amplify that microflash pulse solely by preparing the follicle with the slow thermolysis in the beginning. So now we can use microflash, but with more slightly distorted hairs, deeper hair, stubborn telogen, difficult hair in general. The main reason why I think some people don't like this one as much is mainly just because of the timing of it. That slow thermolysis portion takes about a second to a second and a half, depending on the intensity. So instead of having a pulse that is just fractions of a second, you have to press and hold down the foot pedal for close to 2 seconds on most cases. The two-pulse technique with displacement is mainly for deeper hairs. Remember, this is a technique that we use to treat dermal papilla to bulge. And so we go deep, move up, and then treat the bulge area. The bulge area, if you're not familiar, is the area with all the stem cells. So it is also a critical area to treat when we do electrolysis. Let's go to our webcam so that we can flip through and see some examples of these modalities in action. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a preset. So we haven't talked about preset just yet, but a preset is going to give me a body part and an intensity. So when I press on my key, there's a picture of a hair follicle here. And this picture of a hair follicle will load up all of the different body parts that are available on this machine. So remember, the user settings are my own creation. So users will have 0 and then some number depending on what you've created. In this machine, there's nothing saved. I believe that we've never actually used them. Then we have underarm, we have eyebrow, we have breast, upper lip, arm, chin, bikini line, nape, leg. Now, not every body part will exist on this machine. I realize that their space is limited. If you're working somewhere that is not displayed, like back, for example, which is a pretty common area, but is not on this machine, then you just have to think about, what does the hair resemble? What other area kind of looks like what I'm doing that I can use? So let's go to chin, which is a common area to do. So when I press underneath it, it will display it on the right. So if I press one more time, for example, now it selects the bikini line. The bikini line now is displayed on the right. So make sure that whatever you're selecting, when you're pressing underneath it, is showing up on the right. This is my selection. So I want chin. The first number just means the body part, and it goes like this: 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we come back here, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So the first number is just the body part. That's why chin is 30 something. The second number, the one that is blinking, that's the important number. That is my intensity. So the intensities, they go from 0 to 9. And 0 is a preset. So if I select chin 30, 30, it will give me time and intensity. So there is something saved under that preset. I can go all the way to chin 39. Now we rarely go up that high, but it's there. Something that is common to use, I'll just keep it at 33. So you want to select whatever number you want, use your keypad, and you want to make sure that when you go back to your working screen, your treatment screen with my modality, that I see my preset on the right. So this is chin 33, and there's a little eye because I am in insulated settings. Remember, the insulated settings was what we had selected in the beginning when we were under the configuration menu. So insulated settings, chin 33. in thermoflash, 1 pulse, I have 0.10 second at 46%. So depending on the version of your machine, if you compare machines with your peers, you might notice slight differences. That is not really that big of a deal. The main reason for this is just you're going to have a preset that is going to be close to this. So 0.10 at 46%. If I change modality, let's go into microflash. You'll notice that I'm still in chin 33, so the machine is not going to make me reselect the body part. It's going to remember. It's pretty common that we'll switch modalities while working on a client, so it will remember what you've selected. But now our time and intensity has changed. Here we have 0.035 at 74%. So we're in thousandths of a second. Our pulse went from being a tenth of a second to 0.035 of a second. So much faster. That means my intensity can be higher. Remember that with this modality, the pulse will be much more concentrated than when we were using the thermoflash. If we go into multiplex, which is our last one, what we see displayed is actually the microflash pulse at the end. If I want to see the slow thermolysis, what I have to do is I have to actually press underneath multiplex here, where the battery is, and it will flip my screen and show me what my pre-warming looks like. So what this says is I have 1.3 seconds at 9%. So anything below about 12 to 13% on this machine, maybe 15, does not coagulate tissues. So all that this does is it slowly warms up my tissues in order to prepare my follicle for this pulse here. This is at 70%. It will definitely coagulate. So I can see what my slow thermolysis settings are by pressing right underneath the multiplex here and displaying it. If I want to do 2 pulses, remember that we can set the machine to do 2 pulses for us. This is what this key here, you get the little bumps. Little bumps signify pulses. So I can go and I can do pulses. When I'm ready to work and I press and hold my foot pedal, with the multiplex, you have to hold the foot pedal down until the full completion of the pulses. Remember, I have 2 pulses here. So watch the lights at the top. You'll see them light up and you'll see them flash every once in a while. So I'm press and hold. And that was my 2 pulses. So I press and hold. I have the pre-warming and then I have my 2 pulses. Now, if I am impatient and I press and I lift, what happens is it does do the beep, but unfortunately, it's not going to complete the full duration of the pulse. So what I'm essentially administering is just going to be that slow thermolysis. I'm not even letting it go to the first pulse of microflash. So no coagulation will happen. So sometimes if you work with this and you're just pressing quickly like this, you think you're working, it's beeping, but essentially all that you're doing is just you're interrupting the pulse. So keep that in mind. This won't be as much of an issue when you're doing thermoflash or microflash. Main reason for that is because the timing is too quick. As soon as you press, it's already delivered the pulse. So you can lift your foot right off. Because it's a tenth of a second, you can't really interrupt that. It's already delivered it. It's too quick. Same thing with the microflash. Remember that I can set the machine to do multiple pulses. Let's go to 3 just for fun. And I am going to press and hold. And the machine will beep 3 times. Now remember that we can change the delay between the pulses. So I can make my pulses much shorter by going into my menu here, and where it has the 2 little bumps, which signifies the pulses, I can make this shorter. So why don't we go to 0.3, for example. Now I'm at 3 pulses, but my delay in between is much quicker. So you can tell just by hearing it that the beeps are much closer together. So that's how you would play with the pulses there and change the delay in between by going into our menu there. If you want to go back into what we had before, you would go back here and change the number using the numerical keypad. Another thing that is important when it comes to the thermolysis is going to be your energy levels. Energy levels are going to be displayed using this key here. So this is our auto mode key. If you just go to the right of it, you have a little beaker. This will display energy level directly on the screen. So energy level is the calculation of how much heat is being produced in the follicle with this modality and these pulses, and any changes you may have made to your time and intensity. Anytime you start to play with these things, it will recalculate and display it on here. So it's good for an electrologist to know that if I do 3 pulses with microflash at chin 33, how much heat am I producing? Because if you do this manually, and let's go back to 1, see how my machine recalculated that to a single pulse. If I press on the foot pedal 3 times, then I have to multiply this number by 3. Or I just put my pulses in the machine and the machine will recalculate for me. Remember that it takes into account that the skin does retain some heat and therefore it will downregulate some of these presets here. So this will be less intense when you've put the machine to do 3 pulses. It recalculates the energy level, and so now I know that I'm producing 411 energy levels with 3 pulses of microflash at chin 33. This machine, when you have 13.56 megahertz, the ranges that you need to remember is 200, 400, 600, 800. 200 energy levels is adequate for a fine hair, 400 for medium, 600 is for coarse hairs, and 800 is for extra coarse. I would say be careful going over 800 when you're working on the face, okay? Does not mean that you're doing anything wrong. It just means that you need to really watch the skin for overtreatment. So 411 energy levels. Essentially, what I've set on my machine right now is enough energy for medium hair. That's what this tells you. If I go into my thermoflash and I display my energy levels, now it went back to 1 pulse here. Let's go to 3, like what we were doing with that one. It will tell me 647 energy levels. So I didn't change the preset, but because my timing is a little bit longer, it actually creates more heat in the follicle. This is why we use thermoflash usually for deeper, thicker hairs. So with the same preset and the 3 pulses, just like with microflash, I now have 647 energy levels, which would be an adequate amount of energy for coarse hair. So be careful. You don't want to overdo it. This is why we use energy levels. It just helps to keep you, I guess, to have you understand what settings or what presets you're using. Perfect. So as far as adjusting the parameters, we talked a lot about presets, and the presets are great. They're a great starting point, especially when you're using a new machine. But one nice thing about the Apple's machines is that everything is completely customizable. So you do have the presets. When we were at chin 33, it gave you the time and the intensity. But I can press underneath the time and intensity and input any numbers that I want. So a lot of electrologists, especially when you get more used to using the machine, you can start to play with these presets. So if we go back to our webcam, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the 3 pulses, go back to 1 here. So I have 216 energy levels. But let's say that I want to have a little bit more timing. I press underneath my time and intensity and it will start to highlight it. It makes it blink. And so I can then now start putting in what I want. One reason to keep energy levels is because if you make a boo-boo, it will automatically calculate that boo-boo and you'll see it in the energy levels. For example, I have 0.10 and I decide that I want to do 0.12, but I accidentally put 0.22. And then I press on the foot pedal to confirm. What will happen is that it will now calculate my energy levels based on this new timing. And so I have 470 energy levels. Let's say that I wanted to go to 0.19, but I just wanted to do, and I just do 0.99. just for fun. Press on the foot pedal to confirm. And now my energy level got recalculated again. I have 2,099 energy levels. So this, if I see this number, I'll go, oh, whoa, what did I just do? And I can go back and say, oh, I didn't mean to do that. I wanted 0.19, not 0.99. So then you could go back here and then type in the numbers that you were actually looking to do, which is 0.19. Press on the foot pedal to confirm. And now I have 406 energy levels. Let's say that's what I wanted to do. This is, again, for medium-sized hair, so nothing too crazy going on here. But I just want to show you that you can essentially put any numbers here, time and intensity. Just make sure that you double check what you're doing here so that you don't accidentally put in too much. So this has definitely happened every once in a while when you start to play around with the presets. Okay. So a rule of thumb, usually when it comes to changing the intensities or to go up and down, you can, if you want to play with the presets themselves, you can increase the intensity very quickly just by pressing the plus or minus key. So you can change the percent on the machine. Let's say increase it or reduce it just by pressing the plus and minus without having to select underneath it, typing in the numbers, going all the way to this number here, and then changing it to, let's say, 0.70 to 77%. I can just hit the minus key and it will go down. If I want to change both of them drastically, I can go to my preset, and instead of, let's say, underarm 54, I could go to underarm 53. That will give me a whole new time and intensity, and I can display my energy levels to see what it is. And so this will be like the coarse adjustment. So that will drop it down quite a bit. So going from chin 33 to chin 32, for example, could be a good amount of energy dropped. Let's go take a look at that. So I'll stay in thermal flash, but let me go back to my setting since I messed with it. Anytime you mess with the settings, if you just would want to go back to factory preset, just go back into your body parts here and put in the exact same numbers that you had before. So chin 33 is where I was. I just put it back in here, chin 33, and it will give me back the factory preset. So 0.1, 46%, one pulse in thermal flash is chin 33 at 216 energy levels, which is about a fine hair. So if I want to go, let's go down or let's go up. Why not? Well, I'll go to 34. So now I went from 33 to 34. It went to 0.11 and 48% and 256 energy levels. So we went up both timing and intensity. If I want to go down from there, I can use the minus here, and I just went down to 46. It recalculates my energy level. So this helps to kind of bridge the gap between 33 and 34. Usually, the rule of thumb is that if the hair is deep, you can increase the duration, which is the timing. So go up in time. You go up in increments of 2 to 3. So if I have 0.10, which was our example, I wouldn't usually go to 0.19. I would go to 0.12 or 0.13. So increments of 2 to 3. And if the hair is shallow, it's better to increase the intensity. So leave the timing the same, but increase your percent. Energy level calculations are here, so this goes back over that. Here is the chart that tells you fine, medium, coarse, and extra coarse. I give you the settings for non-insulated or the energy levels for non-insulated. They are averages, okay? So instead of complicating things and starting to think about insulated probes, and it does vary with the type of insulated probe, size of the probe, so it gets a little complicated. I would say stick to just the 200, 400, 600, 800. It's good enough. It just gives you ballpark numbers. And you know that from the moisture content in the client's follicle and the hair, the stage of hair growth, sometimes a thick hair doesn't need as much energy. And sometimes you have those fine hairs that are super dry and they might as well be cemented in the skin, and you need more power even though it's a fine hair. So it's ballpark, right? So this is average. It doesn't mean that if you are doing a fine hair at 400, you're doing something wrong. It just gives you an idea as to where would be appropriate. Now, if you're doing a fine hair and you have 1300 energy levels, that might be a red flag. So we will get into the blend process. So blend uses both high frequency, which we've just talked about, and the galvanic, which is direct current, in order to remove the hair. The high frequency slowly warms up the tissues. Remember the high frequency from the multiplex. So low intensity, just to warm up the tissue, increase the porosity, bring moisture to the follicle in order to facilitate the production of lye. The lye, or the caustic soda, is created by the direct current. The client has to hold the ground because direct current needs a ground, and the probe becomes negatively charged. We produce lye, which is caustic, and caustic means that it decomposes or eats away at tissues. So it can actually dissolve or disintegrate the cells responsible for hair growth, which is how the galvanic will end up killing cells or killing the hair follicle. You need to verify contraindication to galvanic because the current does flow through the body, and so there is sometimes some extra issues with that. So we have different blend modalities. So do you remember from when we were flipping through the blend, I was going through and showing you the different types of modalities. The two types of generic blends that we'll tend to see on the machine will be something called the pulsing blend and the omni blend. The pulsing blend is just what the name says. You just have galvanic with superimposed pulses of high frequency. I like the charts because to me it kind of shows you visually what you're looking at. But essentially what you have, this is MA, which is my intensity with galvanic, and this should not be 0.08. Okay, keep that in mind. It should just be 8 seconds. And this is my timing in seconds. When we do galvanic, our timing is much longer. Lye takes time. It's a chemical reaction. And so if you want to produce lye in order to destroy the hair follicles, you need to give it adequate amount of time. The thicker, deeper, more stubborn the follicle, more distorted, the more timing may be needed. Depends. It's also it also works with the MA, the frequency, the intensity of your pulse. So the more intensity you have, maybe the shorter the pulse could be, but this is what hurts, right? So you have to kind of calibrate the two so that you have a pulse that is tolerable, but not overly long or not overly high. So galvanic always looks like this here. It ramps up, it stays consistent for most of the pulse, and it will ramp down to 0. So that's in MA, and this is for the 7 seconds that it is displayed here. And then throughout this pulse, we will have pulses of high frequency. These pulses of high frequency will be very low percent, but they will be for much longer timing. Another mistake here is that it should be 0.65 seconds, not 0.065. The pulses are pretty much half a second in length, and they are very low. All it does is it agitates the lye inside the follicle. That helps to kind of spread it out. It helps to produce a little bit more of it. Think about using your blender with the pulsing mode, right? It just helps to shake things up inside the follicle as you're producing the lye. How many pulses, by the way, we set here is displayed underneath where you have the galvanic high frequency. Remember, I can change the lead. So here I am leading with galvanic. That means that when I press on the foot pedal, galvanic comes on first. But I could change the lead and have the high frequency pulse come in first. So when I press on the foot pedal, my high frequency would go first and then the galvanic would turn on. Here I have 3 pulses of high frequency, and this is most likely just set by the preset on the machine. So I have underarm 54. That means that it has this intensity, and 3 pulses of high frequency. The Omni blend is our other generic blend that has high frequency, but instead of pulses of high frequency, we have continuous high frequency. So our galvanic looks the same. It does the same. But our high frequency, instead of being delivered in pulses, is going to be continuous. That's why we don't see pulses here anymore. All we see is max, so our setting for the high frequency, which is going to be hidden underneath OmniBlend. When you look at your display, you can press underneath here. It will display my percent. My settings for galvanic, again, note the mistake. It's not 0.8 seconds, 0.08, it's 8 seconds. You would never have a galvanic pulse be that short. Nothing would happen. So at 40.44 MA, 12 seconds or 12% for my high frequency, and it would be continuous. So essentially almost the whole entire time as just the galvanic, same as the galvanic. I can also change the lead back into the configuration menu that we had earlier. I can go in there, change the lead, have high frequency come in first, galvanic come in second. Then I have something called multi-blend. Multi-blend is OmniBlend, but it's followed by a microflash pulse. Remember, microflash is one of my modalities for high frequency. If I get rid of this, it looks just like the one I just showed you. It's OmniBlend. But this is an OmniBlend that needs a little bit of extra help. And so we throw in a real high frequency pulse at the end of the modality. So let's say you were working OmniBlend, but you feel like you need a little something extra to detach the root. You can go into multi-blend. You'll have the OmniBlend going first, and then a real microflash pulse at the end. Electrolysis, this slide is outdated. The straight galvanic didn't used to be on the machine. It is now. So there will be a modality called electrolysis. And so all that you will have is the time and intensity for the straight galvanic. It is what the name says. It's just straight galvanic. There's no high frequency whatsoever. So the different blend modalities we tend to use for deep anagen hairs. Anagen phase is best because this is when you have the most moisture in the follicle, and this is when lye is best produced. Distorted because the lye tends to be a little bit of a seek and destroy, so it likes to travel down the follicle. It can do that. It can actually fill spaces, so it works well with hairs that are distorted where the probe cannot reach the dermal papilla. We use the pulsing blend or the OmniBlend for most normal cases. OmniBlend tends to be very easy and comfortable. And the multi-blend when you're looking for something a little bit extra. So if you want to do OmniBlend, but you need a little bit more intensity because the hairs are coarse, a little bit more dry than anticipated, they're distorted, deeper, things like that, you could go to your multi-blend. Just like energy levels, the blend has something called units of lye. A unit of lye is the amount of lye produced dependent on the time and the intensity of your galvanic. So just like we had our 200, 400, 600, 800, with units of lye, we have 20, 40, 60, 80. So with the senior 3G, it's actually pretty simple to remember both sets of values because they're essentially the same. Just take off a 0 when you're talking about units of lye. What that does is it tells you that if you have a medium-sized hair, I need around 40 units of lye to be able to destroy that follicle. So if you only have 20 and you're wondering why your hair is tugging, it's most likely because you don't have enough intensity. So the same key that displayed my energy levels will also display my units of lye. We'll go and look at my webcam for examples of that. Am I stuck? Okay, before we get to this, let's go back to the video and we will flip through the different blends and talk about that a little bit. So remember, blends and galvanics are going to be here. And so when I look at the first one, it says OmniBlend here on the side. I'm on chin 34. And so there's no pulses because OmniBlend is just continuous high frequency. I have here 8 seconds at 0.39 MA, and I can display my amount of high frequency by pressing underneath where it says OmniBlend, and this will show me my 12%. Yes, you can change this too. So it will, I believe there is a cap, but you can go down lower if you want to. So when I go to that, okay. So when I go to this here, when you press on the foot pedal, you want to look at the lights because they will light up at different points, and it tells you this is galvanic, this is high frequency. So you'll see when both settings or both currents are coming on. So remember, our lead is galvanic. So when I press here, galvanic turns on first, then high frequency. I can change that. I can have the high frequency come on first. It's continuous, meaning that the high frequency stays on for almost the whole duration of the pulse. So I press hold. There you go. So this is an 8-second pulse. You have to keep your foot pressed on the foot pedal for the whole duration of the pulse. If you just do this and you lift off, nothing's happening. Or you can just do this, a little bit of high frequency, you maybe at 4 seconds and you stop it there because the client felt too much, let's say. Then you've only done half the pulse. So you have to go all the way until the beep sounds, otherwise you're not creating the whole entire pulse, and you're not going to be creating this amount of units of Lie. So remember, units of Lie is going to be the same key as energy levels. With this preset, I am producing 31 units of Lie. According to my chart, 20 is for fine, 40 is for medium. So this is a fine to medium size hair. So with this setting, I can do a fine to medium size hair. If I wanted to do something a little bit higher, I could go back into my preset and let's go maybe to 37. 37 with my Omni Blend setting will give me 0.045, so 45 units of Lie. So this now is about a medium, getting into just about a medium size hair. So one thing to note is that the blend settings tend to be, the presets tend to be a little bit on the weak side. You will usually start with at least a level 4 on most of these presets, and going to 37, 38, 39 will not be weird. With high frequency, that's not the case, okay? So it's pretty rare that you'll go above a 36, but with the blend, it definitely will happen. The next one was the multi-blend. Multi-blend here, remember, was like the Omni Blend, except that we had a true pulse of high frequency. I say true pulse because we have something that coagulates, and we know it coagulates because our percentage here is 72%. That's high enough to coagulate tissues. Our timing is 0.059. If I press underneath the multi-blend, I can see what my slow thermolysis is doing. Remember, the slow thermolysis was going along with the galvanic at the same time. So the slow thermolysis and the galvanic go together. This pulse comes in at the end. So if we watch the light show for that one, there we go. So you had the first beep telling you that the high frequency was done. Doesn't like my fingers pressing on this. Okay. And then we talked about the straight galvanic. Straight galvanic, it just has the settings that are displayed here. So 9 seconds and 50 MA. So it is going to be just the straight galvanic. No high frequency. You can tell by the light at the top. It never turns on because there is no high frequency. This is straight galvanic. So 9 seconds of just continuous galvanic current. Let's go back to our PowerPoint. The way that I like to do the blend on this machine is going to be using the tolerance test. So let's go into, we can adjust the parameters the same as that. I just want to skip ahead a little bit so that we can talk about the tolerance test. Some of these we had talked about. Okay, so the tolerance test is a test for the amount of galvanic current that your client can tolerate in that area on that day. So what we do is we click on the tolerance test key, which is this little graph here. So you have this graph with the arrow pointing through the middle. So let me show you on our display here so you can see it right here. So this is the tolerance test key. When I press here, it will just say tolerance, and note that you have to be in the blends in order for this key to work. If you're in the high frequencies, it's not going to let you press on it. So make sure that you're in the blends, and then it will say tolerance, and it would say 0.00 MA. So what you need to do is you need to give your client the ground, see how it's lit up, and you need to do a perfect insertion. Perfect insertion because when you're a little off, you know that you're in the surrounding tissues, the galvanic can be much more intense and it will essentially give you a false reading, a false tolerance test, because the client will feel it much quicker and it will be painful and they will say stop too quickly. So I give them the ground, I will do a perfect insertion, and then when they are ready, I will tell them that I'll press and hold down the foot pedal. It's essentially going to increase the MA slowly until you get to a point where the client can feel it, and then they have to tell you to stop when they're at the peak of their tolerance. So it will give me essentially an MA reading for how much my client can tolerate. So I've given them the ground, and now I'm going to press on the foot pedal. And what you want to do is you want to watch the, let me put it. There we go. So press and hold down the foot pedal, and then the client says, okay, stop. And I lift my foot off the pedal, and then I get a reading in MA. And so it says here I stopped it at 0.49 MA. I recommend you do maybe 2 or 3 test insertions in the same area so that you can get an average, because you know there's always one zinger and then the other ones are okay. So sometimes it happens that the client will definitely feel it. So let's reset our test. I'm back to 0.00. I'm going to do another test. I'm going to press and hold down the foot pedal. The client says, I don't feel it. I don't feel it. Oh, okay, I feel it. Okay, stop, stop. And I lift off the foot pedal again. Now, let's say this is my third test. I've been at around 0.40, high 0.40s this whole time. So I'm going to stick with this 0.46 to start with. When I go back into my settings here, it will automatically plug it into my setting. So I'm not going to use Galvanic. I would like to go into the OmniBlend, which is a pretty common one to use. And so since we were at the tolerance test and I switched, let's just put it in. So 0.46. 0.46 is the test that I conducted with my client that told me how much MA they could handle. Now, step 2 would be to look at the body part that I'm working on and ask myself, is this a fine hair, a medium hair, a coarse hair, or an extra coarse hair? Let's say that I'm working on the client's leg and it is a coarse hair. So she's got some pretty thick leg hairs. What I'd want to do is I would want to display my units of lie. And I know that for coarse hair, I need at least 60 units of lie. So I'm going to plug it in. That's what I'm going to type it in. I'm going to go 0, 6, 0. So press on the foot pedal to confirm. And what you can do, what the machine will do is it will take the MA that you've calculated, the units of lie that you've put on here, and it will recalculate the timing needed. So in order to view the timing, you have to actually get rid of the units of lie. So, and then the time comes back. So I know that you can't view both at the same time, which can be a little frustrating, but you get rid of the units of lie, the timing comes back up. What you'll notice is that this says 13 seconds, which is really long. But in order to create 60 units of lie with 0.46 MA, you need 13 seconds of time. So 13 seconds, remember, when you press on the foot pedal here, you're going to have to hold it for the whole duration of the time. Okay, so tolerance test, remember where the key is, it's just to test the MA. You want to do it usually 2 to 3 of them. Take the results or average of whatever you've got. It will plug it in for you automatically, recalculate units of lie depending on what you think is needed for that area, and the timing will be calculated for you. Remember, you need the ground because this is direct current. It tests for galvanic. The moisture test may be available, it may not be. That depends on where you are logging in from right now. Moisture test is, if we go back to our webcam, is going to be the one with the teardrop here. So if you tap on it and it says function not available, unfortunately it is not for the US market. But what this does is it will test the moisture content, both subcutaneous, so on the skin. You do that by giving the client the ground and using the roller from the wand. So I have it here. So you can use the roller on the wand. You will touch the skin, and as you touch the skin, there's going to be something that pops up that will say dry, moist, very moist, normal, something like that. That's one way to test. The other way is going to be with the probe holder. So the actual probe itself, you do a physical insertion inside the follicle, and the machine can test the moisture content inside the skin. This is probably just more of an extra, but still a fun thing if you can have it. Accessories tests, if we go back to the PowerPoint, is going to be to test the functionality of your cords. So I'll walk you through how that's done, because I know that it's not too self-explanatory, sometimes also in the manual. I'm going to back up my camera here, so bear with me as it gets a little shaky. I want you to be able to notice the screen and everything. Okay. Here we go. So don't worry too much about what the screen says, because I'll walk you through it. But what I want you to notice is the front parts here more than anything else. So when you do a accessories test, you want to press on the accessories key, which is this one here. So it will tell you how to do this when you look at the screen. So it will say, and it also lights up the ones that we're testing. So it says insert probe holder A into the red connector. The way that this works is you take probe holder A, which is the one that is lit up, make sure you have the right cord, make sure there's no cap on it so the prongs are exposed, and then we take this out of the machine. I'm going to take this and stick it into my machine like this. So essentially I'm creating a circuit, a closed circuit, by plugging both ends of my probe holder back into the machine. Then it says to depress the pedal. So you're going to press on the foot pedal, and then it will send electricity through that cord, and it will tell you whether it is defective or if it is functioning properly. My foot pedal is on. So we can do this, and then as we go through, you can press on the same key, and then it will change. Now I can go from check probe holder B. So I need probe holder B. Again, make sure there's no cap on it. You're going to stick it into the machine, press on the foot pedal, and it will tell you whether it's functioning or not. Next test is the black cord. So black cord is connected here. I want the other end of the black cord. So take this off of it. You just want this part here, stick it into the red connector. Now both ends are connected into the machine. I can press on the foot pedal and it will tell me if it's functioning or not. This is for that one here. And then the last one will be just the red cord. The red cord, let's put it back in here. Now, how we test the other end, did you see how this one lit up here? So I need to take this off to expose the actual banana prongs. Stick that in here. Both ends are connected to the machine. I press on the foot pedal and I can test the cord itself. So you can do that if at any point you're not too sure. Just make sure that you're using the correct ones. They should always be lit up over where both ends of the cords should be plugged into. There is a rough billing system with the machine. So the billing system essentially allows you to set your prices to a certain extent. you will be able to see those. Let's go into that. I'm going to have to fix the camera real quick. Okay, so the billing system is going to be, let's go back into our, let's say, thermoflash, is going to be that little person that is here right underneath the display screen. So when I press here, what I see is begin treatment, end treatment, view cumulative, reset cumulative, and billing rate. So you can go in here. You will have to first set your billing rate in order for this to be able to be used at all. You can set taxes. If you charge taxes on services where you live, you can set taxes. There's 2 taxes that you can set. Some places actually have multiple taxes. So you can set tax rates, you can set your hourly rate, and you can set your minimum charge rate. Keep in mind, this is a little bit more rudimentary, so you're not going to be able to set multiple increments, not like the Excel. If you charge, let's say, $60 an hour and your half hour is exactly $30, or let's say you're $100 an hour and your half hour is exactly 50, your 15 minutes is 25, then you can use this and it will work perfectly for you. If your half hour rate is not half of your hour rate, it's not really going to work so much. So you can come in here and set that kind of stuff. You can set your units. Is it dollars? Is it pounds? Is it euros? And also the way that you are going to display your decimals. Because in Quebec, for example, we use decimals where commas are and commas where decimals when it comes to numbers. So when you've set that up, then you can come in here and begin treatment. When you begin treatment, you'll put in, let's say that you are working on this client for half an hour. You work for the half hour, and then at the end, you can end the treatment, and it will display how much this client owes you. Let's say you work a little bit more than half an hour, it will calculate the extra time spent. So it just helps you with your billing. That's really the extent of what the billing system here can do. This is an example, $60 an hour. Minimum charge is $7.50. So even if I work 1 minute, I will not be charged less than that. These are 2 different types of taxes. Units are in dollars, and this is how the money is displayed. So 112.34, for example. These are the different formats that you can see. Different billing units that you can possibly have on there too. So when you start a treatment, it's going to ask you to put in the amount of time for that session. So let's say 60 minutes, which is an hour. Then you're going to go into your treatment mode. Let's say we're working multiplex. We're working underarm 54. We are working 60 minutes because we've put that on the previous screen. And this is active. So that tells you that you are currently in an active file. Or there's no file, but there's an active billing cycle. You work for the 60 minutes, and then at the end, you can end treatment. You can end treatment early because sometimes you put in an hour, but you only needed 45 minutes. And so it will calculate and give you the stats based on however you end the treatment. And see, it tells you here, regions treated. So you did underarm 54 in thermolysis. You did NAPE 45 in microflash. So you can see the different settings. So when you do your charting, it can make it a lot easier. It would also tell you the time, the number of insertions. Remember, insertions are going to be how many times you press on the foot pedal. It doesn't really give you much more than that. You can use this for virtually any client that comes in, get these stats right off the board here and not really worry too much about the money part of it. So it can help you with your charting because it can keep track, especially if you work a lot of different body parts. So number of insertions will be displayed here. So we did 250 hairs, quote unquote. So that's 250 pedal pushes. And then the money, right? So we've already said we were $60 an hour. So half an hour would be $30 plus your taxes. And it will tell you how much that client owes. So with the taxes and that type of price bracket, you're essentially at $34.49. So can make it easy for you to build clients or to bill clients. Sorry. You can also display the statistics on the screen. So this might be something you might want to use a little bit more. So for example, We did 250 hairs. We did an hour, which is, and these are the different taxes there that will tell you the amount. So all the different statistics that we can see. And then you can reset. So when you reset this, then you can do this for every single client. And anytime a new client comes in, you can at least see how much how many hairs you've treated, how long you've worked on them, and then fees if you want to. So you can display it that way. The Vita phases are what gets connected to the front of the machine. So remember I was telling you that the machines have this little plug in the front. So if we go back to our webcam, the plug here is this one I'm talking about here. So this is for the Vita phases. The Vita phases are going to be available on international models and also for people that are in, well, really anywhere outside of the US would be considered international. So there's different types of attachments, and these attachments are called Vita phases. If you buy, FYI, if you find a machine, a Platinum specifically, that was built prior to 2014, most likely there will be an attachment for Vita phases on them. Sometimes some of the XLs might too, some of the early versions of the XLs. So some of the older machines on the market may actually have the Vita phase active on them. You would just have to get the actual hand pieces if it doesn't come with whatever you just bought. So the Vita phase looks like this. The IM is ionomassage. So this is for cataphoresis. It also has some red light. It vibrates and it helps to penetrate the product on the skin. You have one that is for stimulomassage. It has essentially microcurrent. It helps to massage the skin and circulation. We have light therapy units. They'll have different colors. They change. One of them will change all three colors. And it can vibrate, not vibrate, but it can blink or not, so pulse or not. And there's an infrared attachment. So infrared just has infrared type of light wave. Here they are. So this is going to go through. I have the PowerPoints for you to download at the end of this. And so don't worry if you're, this for later reference, it is going to be there. I would like to go back. I believe there is just one section that we sort of skipped real quick to get to this. For this, we've talked about the programs, cataphoresis and anaphoresis. This is kind of what we skipped here, so we talked about that. Okay, so cataphoresis and anaphoresis is essentially the last of the mode keys that is down at the bottom. Cataphoresis we use as aftercare. It is positive ionization, so it uses the positive pole in order to push products in the skin, to reduce redness, to close the pores. So these are all of the different things that cataphoresis and the positive pole can use. And yes, it is available in the USA, so you can ignore that. So post-care, it's germicidal because it produces hydrochloric acid on the skin. This is what the positive pole produces when you do the galvanic current. So since it acidifies the pH of the skin, it helps to kill bacteria that would normally proliferate on the skin. It's a vasoconstrictor, meaning that it actually constricts blood vessels. That's why it helps with swelling and redness. It's an astringent on the sebaceous gland, especially with thermolysis. The sebaceous gland can become hyperactive. That's one of the reasons why we see breakouts sometimes in areas with a lot of sebaceous glands. So doing cataphoresis can help because it will calm the sebaceous gland, help to constrict the duct to the sebaceous gland. It is calming because it reduces redness and all of that. You normally would want to do this for about 3 to 5 minutes, and ideally with a water-based ionizable product. An ionizable product is a product that is positively charged. So when you have a positively charged product on the skin, and a positively charged electrode on top of that, remember that positive repels positive, and so it will push the product deeper into the skin than if you were just to put it on and rub it in and call it a day. The intensity can vary depending on the client's tolerance, the area, and the size of the electrode. So because this has a bigger surface area than, let's say, the stud, which is a small little point, you can actually feel maybe more with the stud than you would with the roller. With the cataphoresis, my rule of thumb is you may feel some tingling, you may feel nothing at all, but it should never hurt. the machine will come preset. So when I work chin and I switch over to cataphoresis, it will automatically give me an MA setting that is appropriate for the chin in order to do cataphoresis. When I make contact with the skin, I put the gel on, I start to rub over the area with the gel, I will ask my client, how does it feel, right? And if they say, oh, it tingles too much, you can always lower it. So you're not locked into anything when it comes to doing this. You can also go up. So both of them will work. Anaphoresis is the opposite pole. We use anaphoresis more in aesthetics. It is good for disencrusting type of facial, not really something that most people will do when you do electrolysis. But essentially, this is everything that it does will be the opposite of what the cataphoresis will do. I would like to show you the cataphoresis, anaphoresis on the machine here. So let's go into our preset here. I was at chin 37, micro flash. I'm ready to do cataphoresis, and so I will go to my last key here and press down here. It will say cataphoresis. It comes preset. Because I had chin selected, it says 0.40. That's my preset MA for that. I have to give the client the ground. Even though I was doing high frequency before, when I go into cataphoresis, cataphoresis uses galvanic or direct current, and so I need the ground. The other thing that you need also is going to be the wand, which is on this side here. And so when I am in the cataphoresis, I put the product on the skin. I give my client the ground with a paper towel that is wet, and then I will use the roller or any other type of attachment electrode. It doesn't really matter, and roll on top of the skin. So I'm not plugged in because this is the older version of the wand. If you have a newer machine, it may just look like this one here. Both do the same, okay? It's just that instead of having a twist to hold it in, this one just has a little hole. You click it into that, and then this is how you would use it instead. So both of these will work. So you roll on the skin, do it for 3 to 5 minutes. Once you've made contact and everything works, this actually lights up. So see, it's not even covered. I'm just touching my own skin, and this actually lights up. So that tells me that the current is flowing. One thing you do not want to do is press on the foot pedal at the same time, because if you press on the foot pedal as you are doing this, the foot pedal actually increases my settings here. And so if I press on the foot pedal, turning on because it's touching itself. If I press on the foot pedal, my MA will start to increase. It'll go for 0.40 and it goes all the way to 1.99, I believe is the max that you can do. And that the client will definitely feel. So make sure you're not pressing on the foot pedal. There's no need for it. The only time you would press on the foot pedal when doing this is because you are on purpose trying to increase the MA. Don't do it otherwise. If I wanted to go into, let's say I also did some bikini line, I can actually change the body part right in cataphoresis, and my MA will be changed over here. So now I'm at 0.95 MA. So that tells you a little bit here how you can do the cataphoresis. Okay, we were on this slide here. Perfect. So it's a computerized epilator. That means that it definitely allows you a lot of flexibility when it comes to timings. So times and intensities, features, the presets. That's one of the biggest thing with this machine. There's going to be a lot of the presets. Remember that while there is presets, it is still completely customizable. It's very efficient, very effective. There's a lot of different modalities. So we have on this machine 3 different thermolysis modalities, 3 different blend modalities, 1 straight galvanic, anaphoresis, and cataphoresis. And it is an extremely durable unit. So that is the end for this presentation here. So what I will do is I will go into this slide here. So it looks like not too many questions here. Put that to me. I do have some files for downloads if you would like. So the manual is the first file. So the MU is the manual. That comes when you buy the machine. I have an energy level chart. It does compare with different machines. If you have more than one, it might be good to actually have that. You have the PowerPoint that I just went through. So the Apple's Senior 3G English Final is the PowerPoint I just went through. And then the all modalities kind of has a chart. It also compares to different machines, but a chart with different types of hairs and suggested modalities that you can use. So it's just some things that I had on my computer that you might find interesting. So I will actually stop the recording here.